Hey, this is part two of Unit 6A, Services and Settlements. We're going to finish up with how services work for this chapter. Once again, please make sure you write your essential questions, leaving space for answers as we go through the notes. All right, functions of a city are based on what its big jobs are, and we call that the basic employment. That's what brings money into the urban space. Pittsburgh was based on the steel industry. New York was based on banks. Sometimes a city can take on a name. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, that's their football team. So it can identify it. And this is called the economic base of a city. This is what brings the money into the city. The non-basic employment is all the jobs that shift that money around. They deal with infrastructure, the teachers, the retail workers, all the folks who work within the city, but are not part of that basic employment. So the Starbucks workers, the high school teachers. The larger the city, of course, the higher percentage of non-basic jobs. All cities have the same non-basic jobs. Everybody has teachers, everybody has store clerks, everybody has gas stations, things like that. So, for every city, you're going to have your basic employment and then your non-basic employment. Now, the multiplier effect says for every basic job you add in whatever industry it is, you're going to produce more non-basic jobs, because someone who comes in to take a job in the basic industry probably bring in family, kids, so you need teachers and everyone else. Becoming successful in the basic area can also lead to agglomeration. A lot of steel factories were built in Pittsburgh during the heyday and boom of the steel industry. Same thing out in California in Silicon Valley. A lot of tech firms out there. Why do business services cluster in large settlements? Well, people. Basic industries want to settle where there's a lot of people so they can have jobs, specialization of different cities, distribution of talent. If you look on the map, you're going to see the manufacturing and durable goods, a lot of it in the Northeast. Folks, non-durable goods, a lot of that in the South along the coast. So you're going to see this stuff occurring where you have larger settlements. You're not going to see big factories in rural areas. They need to be able to get their products to market from the last chapter. So they want to be where the people are so they can have workers and easier way to get their stuff to market. Why are consumer services distributed in a regular pattern? Well, folks, that's that Walter Christaller central place theory from the last set of notes. Profitability. You want to know how far people have to go to get your product, how many people you need to get in the door, that threshold. And in that way, you can draw the market area so you know where to best put your market. Optimal location of a market. Where do you put it in a linear settlement as opposed to, say, a non-linear settlement, clustered or dispersed? Periodic markets are easy. They can pop up anywhere. They're going to pop up where the people are. The local farmers markets, garage sales. You can move them if you're not being profitable. Now, services are going to nest. You're going to have a bunch of small convenience stores within the same market as a larger grocery store. I don't want to drive all the way to the grocery store if I'm just getting a candy bar. I might stop at the convenience store. But if I need to buy more stuff, I'm going to go all the way to the grocery store. Now, just looking at this map, optimal location for pizza delivery. If you look at houses A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G, you'll see the majority are to the left, so that's where I want to put my pizza shop. Now, if I convert those houses into multifamily tenements from industrialization or apartment complexes, you can look at the numbers, and doing the math, there's more people to the left, but there's a bit in those two to the right, 19 and 15. So we're going to move that pizza place over just a little bit to try to grab that business too. Why are they optimal, folks? Well, you want to get the most business possible for where you locate your business. Smaller central places need to be located closer together. Consumers are not willing to travel as far. Like I said, I'm not going to go that far just to get a candy bar. Larger central areas are so important that distance isn't a factor. People are willing to drive to Nissan Stadium to see the Titans, or drive to another city if there's a concert of a group they want to see. Now, with the urban hierarchy, has levels with only a few cities at the top, so this works the same way. Bigger cities, there's only a few of them, and as you work your way down the list, there's more and more small towns, more and more little hamlets, little tiny cities, things like that. There's a lot more Murfreesboro-sized cities out there in the world than there are New York City-sized places in the world. And of course, the higher you get in the hierarchy, the larger the population, the more variety, the more functions, more services that exist. Now, urban sizes, just understand that in unincorporated areas, very few services exist. And as you work your way up the list, past villages and hamlets to towns, you're going to see more services exist. When you get up cities and metropolises and megalopolises, you're going to see lots and lots of cities. If you want to remember these in order, we've made a mnemonic device with the first letter being the name of the urban size. Now, distribution of settlements in the nation can be either one of two ways. The first is rank size rule, based on the size of the population in each successive size of cities, or primate city rule, where one city is much, much larger than any other city within the country. Now, rank size rule, there's a connection. When you're looking at your urban hierarchy, you can predict the size of the cities based on rank size rule. The sixth largest city is going to be 1/6 the size of the largest city. This works well in the US, but not well in other places. Remember, the rule is very simple. The nth largest city's population in size is 1/n, the size of the largest population. You can really look at it in the United States and in Indonesia. They both pretty much cover rank size rule when you're looking at the major cities. New York, the largest, followed by Los Angeles is 1/2 the size. Chicago is 1/3. If you're looking at Indonesia, you can see Jakarta, and then Surabaya is 1/2. So it looks a pretty good straight line. You're going to have some deviations in there, but it's a pretty good straight line when it comes to the sizes of your cities going down by 1/2, 1/3, 1/4. Primate cities, on the other hand, are disproportionately larger, and not just larger, but also more important. They control the power, the money, everything is there. Mexico City, Buenos Aires, London, Paris, Rio, they are much, much larger than any other city. The second largest city, they're much larger as you go along. All right, now world cities. World cities are global cities that have a disproportionate amount of power in the world. There are 3 world cities or global cities. They have high levels of everything within their city. And that has changed over the years. In the 1600s, the biggest cities, London, Lisbon, and Amsterdam. 1700s, it became Rome and Paris. 1800, we changed to Berlin, Chicago, New York City, and St. Petersburg in Russia. And by the 1900s, it has become London, Tokyo, and New York City. If you can see your world cities, the big orange dots on this map, major cities, the smaller orange dots, they're still important cities within their regions, but they're not world dominant like the world cities are. And then secondary cities become much less powerful, but within their small region in their country, they can be important. Now, modern cities are the centers for financial distributions, informations. Multinational corporations have headquarters in these cities. They have lots of influence, pan regional influence. They extend outside their own countries. New York City affects not only northeastern United States, but Canada and the world, especially with the stock markets. Their influence is larger than its share of the population. The second sit below that, below world cities, are your mega cities. These guys are just big by their own right, so of course they're going to have influence. Mexico City is a giant city in Mexico, which is, a NIC country, but because of its size, it affects not only Mexico, but the surrounding countries. Now, urban changes in the U.S., yes, we have changed over time. In stage one, everybody needed to be near ports or railways or waterways. That's stage one. This is all based on Samuel Bochart. Stage two, Iron Horse. We're starting to build canals and railroads and steamboats because we're into the Industrial Revolution. Stage three, Industrial Revolution is full swing, so now we have industrial cities everywhere. We're building railroads everywhere. And in stage four, we're now building highways. We have cars, we have trucks. Trains are still here, but they're used for freight only. They're not as big when it comes to passenger traffic. So cities change. Cities become important at one point and then fall out of importance in another. When you look at this evolution, folks, Flint, Michigan during the steel rail era was huge. It has since fallen out of favor since secondary has moved away from the Northeast, so that city is no longer of great importance. The cities growing in importance are more the southern cities where manufacturing is going. Now, what do you do when you lose that business? What does the Northeast do when industry moves south? They become what we call post-industrial cities. They have to begin focusing on service industries since manufacturing has left. They're converting old factories into malls and apartments, condos. You have to change what you're doing. Take an old abandoned building, knock it down, and put a park. Their architecture is old. There's not a lot of uniformity. The cities were focused on manufacturing, but now they're not. So they've had a boom. They're in a bust. They have to find ways to get back to a boom. Bringing in things that bring people down, like music venues and sporting facilities, will bring people back down and allow the city to come back to its original glory. Urban sprawl, on the other hand, when cities spread, can be a problem. We rely on motor vehicles, home ownership outside of cities, which can cause a problem as cities begin to just spread out. We've talked about the concept of Nashville and Murfreesboro eventually melding, killing those little cities in between and turning them into neighborhoods. That's urban sprawl. The U.S. government encouraged cars and trucks. They built all the highway systems. This allows us to drive more, allows cities to grow farther and farther out. When we take out farmland, folks, we turn it into parking lots, we turn it into schools. Just think of Blackman, it used to be a farm. Now it's part of the urban corridor of Nashville and Murfreesboro. Issues and services in urban areas. Well, we're looking at density gradient. Density gradient means the more urban you are, the more number of houses per land it is in the center, and that decreases as you go out. The inner city can pack hundreds of dwellings per acre, while out in the suburbs, there's less, a lot less. So when you're looking at your density gradient, looking at the center of the city, here you are looking at lots and lots of people, and as you move to downtown, you're working at a much less amount of houses. Now, the number of people living in the center has decreased, so the density gradient has a big gap right in the middle in here. It doesn't go all the way up to a point because at the very center of the city, you get people who don't live there. You don't have a lot of downtown housing. So you have a gap in here, but then you have lots of people living, and then it decreases both sides from the distance from the downtown. You're losing people in the inner cities, population decline, abandonment of houses. You're getting more stores downtown and not a lot of housing. A lot of big cities, though, are starting to change, and they're converting a lot of their older buildings back into housing, trying to bring people back in. Public transportation was created for inner cities. Very few people, or a lot of people lived within walking distance of their place of employment. They could just hop on a bus and get there, cheaper, less polluting. Rush hour was easier. Public transportation is losing popularity because it's not flexible. You miss a bus, you got to wait for a bus. Sometimes you don't want to wait. In a car, I can go anywhere I want. So public transportation is going to have to change, try to figure out how to meet the needs of city dwellers to make it more popular. Nashville attempted to pass a transportation plan, which involved some light rail. That got voted down a few years ago. Services in urban areas. Every time you drive into a city, you see the very center. Just think of Nashville downtown, the Batman building. We call that your central business district. Land is very expensive at the center, so you don't build out, you build up. Modern times retail stores are going to be in the bottom floors, and then you're going to have housing above. Land values decrease when you're moving out from the CBD. So as you're moving out, you can afford to buy more land, but in the center, it's very expensive. So as you move out, distance increases, and therefore land prices decrease. But in the very center, you're going to get vertical expansion. You're going to get people building up and people building down. In Montreal, there's a giant mall underground in Center City, Montreal. It's great. It's going to save on land costs, but it's also good in the wintertime because it can get very cold there. Now, your bid rent theory, this is simply based on how much are you willing to pay for property. Large department store chains, if they're expensive, they could pay more for it. So a lot of them, you're going to see Macy's in downtown. You're going to see expensive stores in downtown. You're not going to see Walmarts in a downtown. They're not going to be willing to pay that much. You're also not going to see manufacturing and warehouses. You're going to see them more moving out to the outskirts where land is cheaper. They're not willing to pay very high for that much land. So moving further out, land is less attractive to industry. Well, that's where houses begin to be built. It's even cheaper the farther out you go. So you start to get more suburban, more rural areas. The pattern, it sounds simple, but it's not, because shopping centers, industrial sites, they all influence it. Physical features influence it. If you got a river moving through, people want to live on the river because of the view. That's going to change housing and where it's purchased. So you always have to look at, these are models. The bid rent theory is just a theory because things can change it. There's your bid rent curve picture. As you can see, closest into the center of the city, folks, you're going to have very expensive rents. Your retail mainly goes here. Going out a little bit, you're going to find your manufacturing sector. Land's a little cheaper. And then as you move farther out here in your blue section, you are going to see more residential houses because land is even cheaper. Okay, that's your notes, the second part for chapter 12. Please make sure you go through and you answer your questions. Understand basic versus non-basic employment, looking at consumer services. How do they decide where to locate? Think of the pizza place. Know your urban hierarchy, starting at the very top with, mega cities and metropolises, and at the bottom, hamlets and unincorporated areas. understand what rank size is compared to primate, know your 3 world cities and what's their impact, definition of a megacity, go through Bochert's 4 stages, make sure you understand those. Finally, understand the central business district and bid rent theory, the costs involved, who's going to be in the CBD, who's not going to be in the CBD, as you are going along. And I thank you